Up next, we'll have the digital canvas Art Beyond Gallery Walls. Can I invite everyone on stage, please? Our panel moderator will be Evan Garza. Evan is the co-founder and director of the Fire Island Artist Residency Program. He's also the Exhibitions and Public Programs curator over at the School of the Museum of Fine Arts. Evan is an independent curator and writer, and his works have been published in Art Forum, Art International, and the Huffington Post.
I'm happy to introduce our panelists: Jeff Lieberman, a kinetic sculpture artist; Sam Aquilano, co-founder of Design Museum Boston; Kelly Sherman, artist, strategy consultant, and entrepreneur; Lindsay Maroney, vice president of operations at ArtNet; and lastly, Aditya Jolka, co-founder of Pannel 8.
Thanks, guys. Enjoy.
Thanks so much for the introduction and for being here today. So we're going to keep this conversation pretty candid. The subject matter is, the digital canvas, what the meaning of art and artists, what that means to exist online. And so just to kick off the conversation, what we'd like to do is basically to introduce each of our panelists to the audience and to Hacking Arts. Just have each of our panelists give a little bit of a 3-minute introduction as to what they do and what their practice is, what their background and their current practices are. We'll start with Jeff.
Hey, everyone. Thanks for having me here, Evan, all the organizers. Yeah, I don't have much of a presentation. I have a couple of videos. Most of the work that I do moves, so to talk about it doesn't do a good job, and photos don't do a great job either. So I used to be at MIT. First 25 years of my life were basically doing physics and math half the time and doing art the other half of the time, visual art and music, and kind of living in two separate worlds and trying to figure out how those things could actually be the same. So eventually I got into robotics, and that started to connect things for me. And then after that, got into studying perception and kind of all the ways that our sensory systems filter and limit the things about reality that we perceive. So all my work kind of treads through those lines. So we'll kind of go chronologically just through 2 quick projects. This is called Absolute Quartet, and this is a robotic music-making machine. You can play it. That plays by throwing these balls 8 feet in the air that are precisely aimed at marimba keys. So there's a bunch of percussion, and then this marimba. So this was me and my friend Dan Paluska, who's another roboticist. We were both working in the Media Lab. And this is an art project where almost all of it was an engineering challenge. One shooter mechanism cannot miss more than 1 in 10,000 balls, or else you have thousands of balls on the floor every day. So if you don't know those kind of, and how to solve those engineering problems, you're not going to get very far in producing a piece that may be in all of our heads. So this was a kind of a transition for me to start realizing that I could be doing math and science as my work as an artist. We can go to the next video. Is a piece called Pattern by Nature that I worked on with 2 other companies, So Limited, which is in Boston, and Hypersonic, which is in Brooklyn. And this started to work more into some of the perceptual things that interest me. You'll see here, it's a 10 by 90 foot ribbon that's kind of hanging through this space, and it's made up of these 4,000 glass LCD tiles. You're seeing some of them close up right now. When you see any one tile, it's very clearly just clear, or it's turning black, or it's some grayscale in between. But when you back up from the ribbon and you see the whole thing, you just see the patterns. You just see the birds going by. You just see the leaves in the wind or the grass. And this is an example of what people talk about gestalt psychology or gestalt perception, where the brain is so good at ignoring the details of what's in front of us to try to make a higher level representation. And that really fascinates me in a lot of the work that I do. We do not notice just yellow and red and green anymore. We notice people's faces, and we recognize them, and we have memories about them. And all of those layers on our perception did not exist when you were born, when you first saw something. And so it really interests me to look at the different layers that we use to represent reality. And that's probably enough of that video. I'll leave it at that. Hopefully we all get to mix our work together talking. So thanks for having me. Come up.
Go for it.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for this awesome opportunity. I am Sam Aquilano. I am a designer, entrepreneur, and I am the executive director of Design Museum Boston. We are a nonprofit public design museum. So much like a science museum where you might go to learn about, let's see, gravity, the circulatory system, electromagnetism, you come to Design Museum Boston to learn about design, aesthetics, and ideation, and process, and prototyping. And like any good museum, we have tours, we have exhibitions, we have lots of artifacts, we do lots of fun stuff with kids. It's one of my favorite pictures because she is just totally getting into this project. I'm sure her mom is also building a bench because the parents get really into these projects as well. And we do lots of outdoor activities. But what makes us really unique is really our subject matter, right? So design is all around us, and it affects every part of our lives. So we made a decision really early on in the founding of the museum. We're 4 years old, to not have a single building, to not have a single location, but instead we put exhibitions all around the city. So we really turn the entire city of Boston into the design museum, and we do it in really fun ways. I mean, people are already out there experiencing design, whether they're thinking about it or not. And so what we do is really provide a lens for the world around us. A couple examples of our work. We have an awesome exhibition at Logan Airport in Terminal E that's all about design and travel. So that's another really awesome opportunity that we have, is to actually put the exhibitions in the right context. So you're out there at the airport, either waiting for a loved one or maybe your flight's delayed, and you can check out this awesome exhibition about how design and travel have intersected since around the 1940s, when travel vacations became a reality, and now, and even looking into the future. So we have vintage luggage, and then talking about the design of planes themselves. We do an outdoor exhibition. Has anyone seen the benches, the street seats benches? Yes, all right, cool. So we have an outdoor exhibition of new public seating around Fort Point Channel, which is really fun. Cute factor right there. Yeah, I had to beg the mom of those twins to let me use this picture in everything that we do. But it's showing how you can use creativity and design to impact the urban environment. There's 18 benches out there. I recommend you check them out. We do lots of events. We do our events in lots of different places. We do Creative Mornings, which is a morning lecture series. We do Unite events, which are all about bringing people together from different industries about design. You're probably wondering why I'm here when this is a panel about digital art, digital design. It's really our website that kind of holds everything together, right? It's this network of disparate exhibitions and programs, and it's really our website that then, our website's really the lobby of the museum. So it's great to be here, and thanks.
Thanks, Sam.
Great. Thanks so much for having me. And I'm Kelly Sherman, and I think there are basically two reasons that I get to share the stage with such an impressive group of people. And one is that I get the art world, and from an artist perspective. So, I went to art school, and I've shown in museums, and I have a commercial gallery, and my artwork's on Pannel, and so I kind of get how the art world works, and in particular, I get it from an artist perspective, which hopefully we'll talk about a little. And then the second is that I'm in the innovation business. I worked for a number of years at the global innovation consultancy Continuum, helping organizations, often Fortune 500 companies, figure out what's next, whether it's a new product or a new service or maybe a new business altogether, and help them figure out how to really grow and transform their businesses. And so I took those two worlds and kind of brought them together, and with Lior Beer, who you saw talking about New Art Love, we co-founded that organization with the support of Mass Challenge, where we were neighbors with Sam and Design Museum, and really thinking about how do you, and since doing more independent consulting, but thinking about some issues that I find really interesting that New Art Love hits on is how do you really tap into real people's needs, not just do business as usual. I think the art world's a great place to think about that as we're changing. What are the things that people are really deeply looking for? What do they deeply value? And how do we build that for the future? The second, which is very much aligned, is really how do you bring a in-person experience, which is so central to the visual and performing arts? How do you bring that physical experience? How do you leverage, I guess I should say, technology while not losing sight of that in-person experience? How can they work together and technology be a way to augment it? I think those are, and actually I guess maybe the third is really around democratizing it and kind of opening it up, both from the buyer perspective, but also from the artist perspective. I think there's a lot of potential for technology, obviously, to be really powerful in that space. So I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Hi, I'm Lindsay. Thank you so much for having me. As Lisa said, I'm from ArtNet. I've been with ArtNet almost a decade now, and I think ArtNet has a very interesting history in this digital and art where the two collide. And so I want to talk a little bit about our history. That's our logo. We were founded in 1989, and the goal has always been to do some of the things actually that Kelly talked about, to make the art world less global and less local and more global, the opposite.
That's a whole different panel.
And to use technology to do that. So our founder, Hans Neuendorf, he was a dealer in Germany, and he had a problem that he needed to solve, which was that when art was being sold in different cities, he needed to understand what the price was and the information. And so ArtNet started, like I said, in 1989 in an apartment in New York City, and they started to collect public auction information and to give it to subscribers via fax. So that's where we started.
The latest technology
right?
at the time.
Well, we started faxing. The art world grew. You know, maybe the two were connected. But in the beginning, the auction houses, they really didn't like this flow of information. They threatened to sue us, to shut us down. But 25 years later, they're our biggest partners. I believe they've seen, the rest of the art world has seen, we've seen how much transparency and the sharing of information has really changed the art world and opened up the art world to more people. If you trust that you're getting the best price for what you're buying, this piece of art that you love, that it's fair, I think you'll continue to buy. And what's most important is that the artists then can continue to sell, that they can make a living. So we're very proud of that history. We brought the database online in 1995, and then shortly after launched our gallery network, which is the exact same goal, which is to make it global. We show free to the public artworks from galleries around the world, in the hopes that you'll find something that you love. So shortly after that, we launched online auctions and monographs. So these were two goals to help people discover more pieces of art. The big name artists help us draw in an audience, and we have this great audience, and we want to leverage it to help you discover newer artists you don't know. Our monographs is a purely academic endeavor. It's working with artists, foundations, galleries to build catalog raisonnés online that you can access. And our auctions is exactly what it sounds like. It's our first attempt at auctions back in the late 90s was similar to actually Sotheby's also did online auctions at the time. We both failed. The internet was not ready to buy art online. The world was not ready. But we tried it again in 2008. And so much has changed, and we're seeing that we're able to, like I said, bring in this great audience to discover new artists. We can, sell the big Warhol piece for, over $1 million, and then we can sell. We can experiment with urban art, or with we have a Korean contemporary art auction coming up soon, and we can test these new markets, which we're very excited about. This is something that we believe in very deeply. So going forward, I guess at ArtNet we're bringing together over 8 million pieces of art on our website that you can discover, 300,000 artists, 2 million visitors come every month, and that's 70,000 people a day who are looking at art, discovering art, buying art, selling art. We're very proud of that history, and we like to think we've contributed a little bit to the global growth of the art world. Thanks.
Okay. Hey guys, I'm Addy. I'm the co-founder of Pannel. That's our logo right there. So I'm a biologist, actually, believe it or not, by training, and an engineer. So when I heard of a panel at MIT called Hacking Arts, I was like, oh my God, how do I get on that? So thank you so much for having me. This is quite a treat. It's a tough act to follow, but I'll try to sort of talk about what we do and why we're so excited by it. Can I change the slide?
Yes, sir.
Oh, there you go. Oh, holding on to that. So we have two parts of what we do. One part of the business that we work with is what we call benefit auctions. When I first came into the art world about 2.5 years ago, one of the exciting things for me was going to all these fantastic galas, benefits, auctions that sort of these nonprofits, museums were putting on, where sort of there was fantastic art to support the programs that these museums are doing, but it was limited to people in the room who were able to buy that art. And we thought to ourselves, how about we take all this fantastic art that's sort of like being donated to these museums and give it to a broader global community? So that's exactly what we do on the benefit auction side. So we work with hundreds of museums worldwide. We sort of support all the events that they're doing in cities all the way from Los Angeles to Hong Kong. We make that available to a global community, and we help them sell that art to a much broader audience who now not only knows about the organization, but can also support them through buying this artwork. So that's one part of what we do. The other part of what we do is themed auctions, where it's more similar to an auction house. So it's very similar to what ArtNet does, except you put a nice theme around it and sort of you give a chance for creative exploration in that particular theme. So to give you an example, one of the sales we just did was a sale called Muse, which was an exploration of artists and their muses. And it was during Fashion Week, which made it more sort of exciting. But again, the opportunity there that we saw was that particularly at lower price points, the big auction houses weren't sort of taking that much interest in. It was really hard for someone who had bought a piece of art to resell it. It was very expensive. It was very intimidating. Moinan mentioned walking into a gallery and being intimidated by that. Imagine walking into a Christie's or a Sotheby's if you've never bought art before and trying to register for a paddle and buying and going in and actually bidding on something. It seemed that sort of making that easier would open the market up to a lot more people, and like Lindsay was saying, would also create that transparency and that liquidity at the lower end. Most importantly, it would also make people who sort of spend money on buying art, especially young professionals, younger people who are getting into the art world, a little more comfortable about the money they're spending because they know there's a place for them to resell it. So that's what we do on the themed auction side. It's like a traditional auction house at lower price points. What have we done till date? I switched it off. That's not what I intended to do. There you go. So we started in 2011. We started doing auctions in 2012. Last year we did about $10 million in bidding activity. This year we are on track to do about $40 million, and a lot of that money goes back into arts foundations, museums, nonprofits around the world. We focus on price points between about $1,000 and about $100,000, where we are sort of the cheapest, easiest, fastest, quickest, sort of most hassle-free way for anyone who wants to buy art or to sell their art that they already own online. And then because we are purely online, we're sort of about half the cost of any other auction house. We eliminate all the costs from the system, like catalogs, the cost of a big space, the cost of storing the art and showing the art, and that makes us sort of very efficient compared to sort of any of the bigger auction houses, who we are complementary with because they're focused on the higher price points. And finally, we have a global collector community from more than 160 countries that we sell this art to, who not only buy this art because they want to collect it, but also learn about all the foundations and museums we work with, and sort of it builds awareness to a global community about programs being done by museums in local communities, including from Boston, from sort of Minneapolis, from all these cities that sort of they wouldn't normally get to visit. So that, in a nutshell, is what Pannel is.
So as you can see from this, from all the individuals that are up here, that this is a very broad conversation that can really be attacked and really addressed in a number of different ways. And I think it's the whole conversation of thinking about art in a digital context really makes a lot of sense in 2013, given the fact that technology and the web are both, they're incredibly experiential. They're things that we experience. Technology provides us with an experience, and it also provides us with a context within which to provoke ideas, to provoke thoughts, to provoke new experiences. And art, really historically, has really done all of those things. My background is in painting. My curatorial projects and a lot of my writing has really been about painting. And painting is really, in a sense, a kind of place mark for the entire history of art history. You can really place that entirety, thousands of years of making art on the kind of plate, the painting shelf. I was the editor-at-large for New American Paintings for 3 years. And New American Paintings is a sort of exhibition in print. And we worked with curators from the Whitney and MoMA and the Walker, and they would basically, we gave them an online system where they would look at JPEGs of works that were submitted by emerging painters from all over the United States. The 6 issues a year were each regional. And those jurors, based on JPEGs, would then make decisions based on which artists would then go in the book. And basically, these jurors are not experiencing this work. So they're not having a physical experience with a painting. Instead, they're having a physical experience with a monitor. And then making their judgments based on what fits inside of a 4-sided JPEG or an installation shot of some work. So it's almost like they would like to have the experience. They're fascinated by the visual presentation of the work, but it's a very different form of experience. It's using technology as a way to facilitate that experience rather than actually having it. So how I'd like to start this conversation off is and this is something that Kelly and I were talking about backstage, is the physical experience. And I want to address that in terms of art and as well as technology, and where those two things meet. And my question really to sort of spring off this conversation is, where is the artist experienced now? Is the artist experienced in real terms? Do we experience art and the artist in a real, tangible, physical way now? Or do we experience it in the way that we choose to based on the technology that we have access to?
I guess that question's to me. Well, I mean, I'm sure everybody has lots to say on it, and anyone who looks at art, certainly. And I think what you're talking about, not so much where is the artist experience, but where is the art experience.
Right.
And I mean, I think that in some ways it's like the rest of the world, sort of where is the world experienced, where are your friends experienced, where is your shopping experienced. Those are all kind of compromised experiences that we are in some ways, as a whole, always better in person. You know, feeling the fabric of a dress I'm going to buy or trying shoes on in person, it's probably a better experience. But there are conveniences of having a compromised experience because you're getting something else. And so, I mean, I think that art is happening. The experiences we're having are not there are more channels now through which we're having those experiences. But I would certainly hope that they're still happening in person.
Mm-hmm. I mean, there's a real importance there. There's an importance to that experience whether you're having it online or not. And I think you have a great deal of experience in terms of how artists, emerging artists in some contexts are really being experienced based on projects that you've worked on in the past. Can you talk about how, especially around the importance of non-brand artists?
Yeah, and actually maybe I'll just back up a bit and think about value, just in terms of sometimes I think you want to have an immersive experience. It's the appropriate thing at the time. But maybe you're trying to do a preliminary search to prepare yourself for an immersive experience. You're about to go to Chelsea and you'd like to know what you want to go see. And you want to start somewhere so that you can kind of curate a more in-depth immersive experience. And in that instance, there's a value to having a sort of an edited version of what that, yeah, thank you. And being able to have the convenience of search terms and filters and maps and all these things that that technology can provide. And so I think it's important to keep thinking about technology as a tool, just like a chisel is a tool, you know, and that it is just one of the many things that we have at our disposal as artists, as business people, to provide an experience or to offer a service. And so I think that's important. From the perspective of, I think, what was the second part of your question?
The non-brand emerging.
Oh yeah, I think one of the challenges that came up a lot working on New Art Love was it was so clear how much value there was to be able to discover new art and to be able to sort through how, you know, there's so much out there. And technology and being online and being able to sort through ArtNet's sites or Paddle 8 and use all those filters, it's just so clear that there's value there. But when it comes time to actually make a purchase, it's a little bit harder, just like buying shoes on Zappos, let's say, or maybe something more expensive. If I'm going to buy a couch, you know, buying a couch online from a brand you don't know, it's probably most people aren't going to do that. You kind of want to feel it. You want to sit on it. This is going to be something you're going to live with, and you're going to spend maybe a lot of money on it. And if it isn't coming from a brand you know, so if it isn't a Warhol, or it isn't from Gagosian, and you know that that's a really solid gallery, maybe it's just some artist that's in Portland, and you saw their work online, and it looks really cool, but God, are you just going to take a risk on it? How do you provide a physical in-person experience? It becomes much more important in that context.
I think this is a great segue to the work that you do, Sam. You know, you basically are the executive director of a mobile museum.
That's right.
So physical experience is really key to the work that you do. It also reminds me of another project that's really been making a lot of headway recently, which is the Center for Experimental Lectures, which is run by the artist Gordon Hall, which in very much the same way, it's sort of this roaming mobile center. Can you address how physical experience is something that's inherent to the work that you do?
Yeah, I mean, oh, do I need to use this? Cool. Testing. Nice. So yeah, the physical experience is key, right? Although I love the online museum, that's really cool. But we do want to have this physical experience of the designs of the artwork. And I think for us, not having the building, as I mentioned, we're always experimenting with how do we blend the physical and the digital experiences. So early on, we were always trying to decide how much we have an exhibition, say, do we put everything up online so you can basically experience the exhibition from the comfort of your home with no pants on? Or do we want people to put their pants on and go to the gallery and see the exhibition, kind of like a teaser? And what we've sort of landed on and decided to do is really blend those two experiences. So if you go online, particularly for the benches, the Street Seats exhibition, you can see everything. I mean, it's the bench, the model that the designer produced, interviews with the designers, videos. But of course, you're sitting in your computer chair. You're not sitting on the actual bench, which is what we really want people to do, is to experience them. So that's what hopefully gets people out there. And vice versa, when you're actually outside and you're on the bench and you want to dig deeper, what we produce is a digital experience on your phone, right? So we have a mobile app, and if anyone knows the Fort Point Channel, there's the Tea Party ship kind of parked right in the middle. So somehow we convinced those guys to allow us to install an antenna on top of the ship. Yeah, that was a big win, Really proud of that. So we have an antenna there that services the whole area. So when you pull up the app, whatever bench you're next to, it pulls up videos and content about that bench. And so now you have this digital experience where, of course, the designer's not there to tell you about his or her experience or process, but then there's this video that starts playing. So it's really how do we blend those things? And I think this is, the first time in our 4 years that we did it with any kind of success. But it's really fun to sort of think about how do you take that further? How do people who are experiencing the exhibition online and people who are in the exhibition talk to each other? How do they converse, and how do you make this blended experience? But certainly for us, it's all about the physical and experiencing design in real ways. And if we can use the web and online tools to make that a richer thing, then we'll do it.
Turns out I'm the only one with a bad mic. So no
Oh,
one
okay.
needs to-
Double mic me.
Yeah, I think, in that sort of sense, technology is really sort of this, in a way, like a kind of middleman between the idea and the experience, providing its own experience in the sort of meantime.
Yeah, it's just different.
Right. And I think to a large degree, and especially recently in the last several years, the notion of the online auction is one that really is very much sort of trying to navigate that same thing, where technology is really sort of providing this middleman experience between you and the thing that you kind of would otherwise be experiencing in a real world sense. So for the two panelists that we have down at the end, you're both really directly involved with online auctions, and your work is directly involved with providing an experience for the viewer in a digital context where they can experience something that otherwise would be experienced in a very physical way. So maybe I'll just keep it really broad and just sort of ask how it is that digital technology in your experiences have really been able to kind of define or provide new ways of thinking about fundraising or thinking about the marketplace in a new way.
Sure. Well, I think the physical is very important. I mean, there's a reason we're all here in this room today. We all want to be together to share ideas and share experiences, right? But we can't always afford to travel. There's also a reason why Skype exists, right? Sometimes you can't make that trip. And so I think what the online world offers, in addition to what Kelly mentioned about maps and lists and tools that will help you, is that democratization of getting the art out there to a broad amount of people, and getting them to be involved in the art world process without having to live in an art hub like New York or London. Do you want to speak a little bit more about the fundraising?
Yeah, I think sort of what's been really interesting hearing everyone speak is that I still, even though I sort of run an online auction house, I still believe that a lot of art is experienced in person. I think that is how you experience art.
Absolutely.
However, I don't think a lot of art is collected physically.
Right.
I think a lot of, if you look at where most art buying happens today, it happens either at art fairs, which are more sort of like, as anyone who's been to an art fair would attest, it's you hardly stop, look at an art, appreciate it. You basically get as quickly as possible to the Gaussian or whichever gallery you're going to, buy it before the next collector comes in, and you're out of there in 5 minutes. I mean, the VIP preview at Art Basel lasts 2 hours. That is when sort of, I think 60%, 70% of the art is sold in 2 hours for an entire art fair. So most of the collecting actually now is starting to happen at art fairs, and I would say online. And it's all a function of, if you collect something, you know what you're looking for, and then this is not like price shopping. So you can't just go to the store and try it on if you don't like it online. If you like a particular Warhol, let's say you like a Warhol flower series, there's only one in the world, and if it comes up online, you will buy it there because that's where it exists. So that's what makes, I think, compared to many other sort of objects that you could buy online, that's what makes buying art online a little more interesting and a little more successful, because we are dealing essentially with unique, one-of-a-kind objects that people are extremely passionate about and want to buy. On the fundraising side, really quickly, I think one of the things that's been really exciting for us is, and I won't talk about sort of maybe the concept of it, but more the effect that it's had. We've been doing this for about 2 years, and we did a study recently where we looked at about 30 institutions that we work with that we'd done online auctions for, and who had, on average, raised about 30% more money in their annual auctions than they would have otherwise. And what that means for them is that they're able to hire more people, they're able to sponsor more artist residencies, they're able to do more things. And you know what? Now they're coming to us and saying, we don't even need to do a physical auction next year. How about we just do an online auction with you guys, save the $200,000, raise the 30% extra more money, and then go do 10 more residencies and hire 10 more people. And I think it's changing the landscape of how museums, foundations, institutions are thinking about fundraising, particularly through art auctions. So that's been an interesting sort of discovery for us, and I think that's very exciting for us, and we'll continue to support that.
I think your work, Jeff, really kind of deals with a lot of the themes that we're really talking about, where we're talking about physical experiences, and the whole notion of the web really brings about these questions about the real, right? So what is real? Is the experience that you have physically more real than the one that you're having online? You're having two experiences, which is more real. Your work as an artist is really about examining those sort of like false notions of the real to some degree. Do you want to go into that a little bit?
Yeah, it depends how deep down the rabbit hole you want to go with that question. I guess I'll start really concretely. If we make a piece like either of the ones that was seen, that can be seen easily by millions of people through the 2-minute documentation we make.
Right.
And sometimes, especially a piece like Absolute Quartet, we had it in a little gallery we set up in New York for like a couple weeks. You're going to get several thousand people to see it, but then all of a sudden it gets published on YouTube and they feature it on the front page, and in one day 1 million people have seen your work. And so I don't have any problem with that, of course, and if any of you want to buy any work, I don't have any problem with that either. It helps people find out that your work exists. It definitely helps people come to the physical space. The Pattern by Nature is in a museum in Raleigh, and people see the video and they actually go stop there when they're in Raleigh. So in that sense, I think it's a beautiful thing. Obviously, we built a 90-foot long piece because it's important that it's 90 feet long. When you are surrounded by it, it's a totally different physical experience.
It's immersive.
But when you kind of look at it, it's maybe not a problem with two-dimensionalizing 3 or 4-dimensional work. There's a mismatch. There's a kind of a desire to have a 4-dimensional experience with a 2-dimensional device. But when we go to a movie theater, 2 dimensions is amazing.
Right.
It's just plenty.
It's just fine.
It's just fine. And I think, to take it down the rabbit hole, it's more about where is your attention and your awareness brought when you're interacting with this thing. And when you go see a movie, that I think that the people that made the movie were totally lost in the movie, you get lost in the movie. When you go to see a Van Gogh painting, he was lost making that piece, not lost in the negative sense. He lost himself in the making of it.
And the oil in the landscape.
He could care less that we put stanchion posts around it 100 years later. He was in it as a direct experience. And it's like as soon as we kind of confuse, as me and Kelly were talking about before, as soon as you confuse the process of art making with the product that comes out of it, which is necessary for economics, for supporting yourself, that's when it seems like all these new paradoxes start to come up.
Right. I'm getting the 1-minute sign. I had no idea that we would be talking about this so quickly. I feel I have like 5 other points that I want to get to. I think this is, this is a conversation. If this was the Daily Show, I'd be like, go online and watch the rest of the interview, because I would love to talk about this for like another half an hour, because there's so many different ways that you can chop it. One of the things that I would have really loved to talk about is community, this whole idea of community in the real world, online, how those two things function and influence one another. And then the other, really would be identity. And maybe this is a hacking arts panel for next year, but I really feel like, especially following these two, a couple of the presentations that preceded this panel, like New Art Love and Curator, the whole notion of personal preference is one that designers, architects, engineers are really placing very high because the marketplace places that as something that's high. And I think identity is becoming really tied to how we think about what we want to see, what we want to buy, and how that's influencing the marketplace, communities, auctions, technology, experiences. So let's just pretend like we went on for another half an hour and all of those things were discussed. In the meantime, we are going to open it up for questions. for anyone in the audience who'd like to ask any of our panelists some questions while we have the incredible opportunity to speak to them. Yes, ma'am.
Hi. So yeah, to follow on some of the topics that you're bringing up. So in our online lives, I think we have a culture of instantaneous speed, bigger, faster, and a number of you touched upon the art marketplace, right? Auctions and different ways that art is bought and sold. And so I really worry about art in that context, i.e., how basically art becomes that kind of commodity. Where is there the space to sort of think about maintaining the spiritual center that art comes from, and sort of how do we think about community and sort of relation, which I think is the center of art as a shared form.
Sure.
And sort of like how do we think about that, both in the online context and offline, and particularly when there's money involved.
Does anyone want to pick that up?
I guess I say one little point before other people flesh out your question more, but if anyone hasn't noticed, things are getting faster.
Right.
They're getting faster, and so on and so forth. And it seems to draw people away from actually sitting in a drum circle for 2 hours and actually knowing that something might happen if you do that, because when you look at it from the outside, it's totally different. But there's nothing necessarily that we need to worry about, because people that go faster and faster, a lot of the time, myself included, you go to a university like this, you work in TV industries, you work faster, it breaks. It always breaks. It's untenable for a long term. And I think what we will see is more people realizing that we don't have to go any faster, and coming to that understanding through themselves and saying, wait a second, I don't have to rush at all. The universe has been doing quite well for billions of years, and why do I have to push harder on that? So it seems like we might come full circle, and people will, on their own accord, kind of leave that train.
Yeah, I think just I do want to talk about this because it's a dialogue that we have quite a bit, which is the role of money in art, like capitalism in art. I mean, sort of in terms of whether it's good for the art world, that the art world is where it is today. It's a $60 billion industry. You read about it all the time in the papers. Another painting sold for $135 million. And honestly, I think, from my perspective, I think it's a good thing when so much money flows into something related to the arts. And I compare two industries. If you look at like the ballet, right, where sort of which hasn't become this commercial per se success. And just this week, the New York Ballet announced bankruptcy. They said they were going to shut down. Versus the contemporary art world, where sort of there is so much money flowing in. But what, in my opinion, that's doing is, yes, it's creating sort of this perception of money, but at the same time, a lot of it is trickling down and inspiring new generations of artists to say, look, I'm going to take this on as a passion, as a career, as something that I'm going to do full time, as not just a hobby, but something that I truly believe in, and that I can use to provide for myself, that I can use to provide for my family, and sort of make it a meaningful pursuit. So I do think it's a good thing. I don't think sort of I think there is a slight bubble to it. There is a slight sort of taking away from the actual meaning of the art. I don't disagree with that, but I think overall for the community as a whole, it's a good thing. I don't know what you think about that.
I just wanted to play the flip side of that coin, which is you asked specifically about art as commodity and the money involved and the sort of fears associated with that. And I completely identify with those fears. My beginnings in the art world started in a commercial gallery, and I realized very, very quickly I didn't like selling art. I was really interested in talking with a collector about the work, the context that work was made in, what it was made of, what was at stake when that work was made, who the artist is, what their practice is really about. And I think in the art world, it's a very important distinction to know whether you should be involved in the moneyed aspect of the art world or not. Felix Gonzalez Torres died in 1996 from complications with AIDS. and the internet was really just starting to come about in '96. In '96, I still had an AOL email address. But I think one of the things that Felix Gonzalez Torres said before he died was he spoke a little bit about the internet and accessibility. And one of the things that the internet does provide is it provides a free experience for the viewer. And there's been a flurry of artists that are really using the internet as a way to completely bypass the marketplace, to go directly to the art experience. The Chicago artist Ivan Lozano does basically a PDF zine called Image File Press, and invites an artist to do one each time. There's a lot of internet-based art that's produced. So I think it's totally a valid concern, and I think it's a question. The more and more that we become faster and faster, and things become more and more expensive, and are sold more and more quickly, I think that's a question that's going to continue to come up again and again. We have time for one very super tiny quick question.
So I'm an art critic, and I'm actually reporting on this for WBUR today. And something I noticed is that criticism hasn't come up. None of you all are critics.
I'm a critic.
You're a critic? Okay,
yeah,
thank
I was
you.
a critic for 7 years.
All right, excellent. It has occurred to me that maybe there is no place in the new democratized art world for criticism. That may not be a necessary function anymore. Certainly, Lindsay Maroney's company has gotten rid of its entire criticism operation. Does anyone have any thoughts on that?
Yes, period. I think, okay, so I was having this conversation the other day about Twitter, and it was basically a conversation about ignorance as it relates to Twitter. And to talk about community, I mean, basically the more that we become Facebook friends with only the people that we want to associate with, or who we find physically attractive, or who we find interesting, who are part of our social circles, the more that social feedback comes to form our own identity, and the more that we keep that around us. And it's the same thing for that Million Mom group that didn't want to see lesbians in the JCPenney ad, or for people who think that Miss America, who have racist feelings. Twitter gives you a microphone for all of those things. And it gives everyone, unfortunately, a microphone. And I think the internet provides an opportunity for criticism in a way that we really haven't experienced before. I mean, blogs. New York Magazine now has an online presence that they never had, a readership that they never had previously. And it didn't have anything. I mean, Jerry Saltz didn't go anywhere once all of that started to really flourish. If anything, it really probably made him stay put. I think the internet has obviously become a place where we say whatever the hell we want, and I think it's the perfect place for art criticism, whether it's poor or not. But that's really becoming the place for it. Do I think that it has any bearing on what Artforum puts in print? Probably not. But what I will say is that what the internet does do is that it facilitates something for Artforum, which is that you can have critics' picks for shows that are happening right now, in Zurich or New York, and those critic picks go straight online, whereas the reviews that their editors would really, really like for their readers to read in print, those things are reserved for the age-old medium of print.
If I can jump in, I think there's just a real opportunity to turn everyone into a critic.
Unfortunately,
right? But I think where we come from an educational standpoint, is giving people sort of the vocabulary and the awareness to actually. I would love it if we could all have a discussion. If I could have a discussion with someone on the street about what's good and what's bad.
Right.
Coming from a design background, we're always having a discussion. How do you make something better? But it has to come from an informed place, and I think that's where this public education and public awareness and appreciation comes from. And hopefully online we're going to have better conversations and not sort of the snarky stuff that
Let's
we
finish
get.
this conversation on Twitter.
Yeah.
#HackingArts.
Yeah.
I think we're done.
Well done.